Hello, this is Mark Pearson with a video about who's going to win the Senate, who's going to win the House, and an update on the presidential election prediction. Welcome to the Honor and Knowledge channel. So we're 8 days out from the 2020 election. All kinds of polls out there about, once again, Trump is trailing. Everything seems just like in 2016. There are some differences, of course, and we don't know today who's actually going to win. So the polls were wrong in 2016. The media was very biased against then candidate Donald Trump. What's different now? Not much. Let's take a look at the New York Times as an example of the media. In 2018, the New York Times, in October, 1 month before the congressional and Senate elections, the congressional elections at which the Republicans lost the majority in the House by losing 42 seats, the New York Times published a very long article regarding whether or not Donald Trump had actually been a self-made man and also about his alleged tax fraud. The paragraph from Wikipedia that describes this is as follows. In October 2018, the Times published a 14,218-word investigation into Donald Trump's self-made fortune and alleged tax fraud, an 18-month project based on examination of 100,000 pages of documents. The extensive article ran as an 8-page feature in the print edition and also was adapted into a shortened 2,500-word listicle featuring its key takeaways. After the midweek front-page story, the Times also republished the piece as a 12-page special report section in the Sunday paper. During the lengthy investigation, SHOWTIME cameras followed the Times' 3 investigative reporters for a half-hour documentary called The Family Business, Trump and Taxes, which aired the following Sunday. The report won a Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting. And yet now the New York Times is not exploring or investigating the Hunter Biden laptop that he left behind at a repair facility. The media is just pointing to Russia, Russia, Russia again, when there's no evidence of that. So New York Times interfered with the election in 2018, and they're interfering with the election now. You want to believe a poll? Here's a poll. 52% of Democrats say that they are afraid to put out lawn signs and car decals, and 77% of Republicans, conservatives, say they're afraid to put lawn signs out and car decals. We all remember Mr. Burnell Trammell, the black gentleman in Milwaukee who was actively supporting President Trump's re-election, and he was murdered, probably because of that support for President Trump. There are many reasons why polls are wrong, not the least of which is people like having the answers that they want to see. Somebody pays for the polls, and they have a reason for wanting that poll done. One of the things that is clear is that President Trump has come through with a lot of the things that he said he was going to do. Down in the description, I'm going to post a link to a lady by the name of Barbara Heineback, an American black lady, very well credentialed, and a Democrat who was once the press secretary for a first lady. Interviewed by Sky News Australia while she's in Australia, she presented very coherent and great short explanation about the accomplishments of President Trump. By the way, Sky News Australia, great place to get news about the United States as well as the world. Let's get into my methodology for determining what was going to happen in the elections for the Senate and the House. After making the videos on the presidential predictions, which I think are pretty solid, I searched for some path that I could use to determine a prediction for the House and the Senate. I was curious. It took me a while, but I came across something that even though it is left-leaning, I've decided that it is good enough, accurate enough, that it could be used as a basis for determining probably what was going to happen. The specific source is called the Cook Partisan Voting Index. It uses the 2 previous presidential elections and the percentage that went to each of the different parties. Those are numbers that can't be fudged. The Cook Partisan Voting Index comes from the people at the Cook Political Report, which is a left-leaning organization. However, the numbers are historical in nature and therefore not subject to manipulation. Using the information from past elections, the Cook Partisan Voting Index, also called PVI, determines how each state or individual district leans either towards Republicans or towards Democrats in comparison to the national numbers. A very leaning Republican district would be, say, R plus 25. The thing to note, however, is you just can't take the information directly from the Cook Partisan Voting Index to determine which way a district or state is actually leaning, you have to compare the information that they provide in the PVI matrix to what really occurred in the presidential election. So, for example, with President Trump, he got just a little bit more than 46% of the popular vote for the whole country, and Hillary Clinton received a little over 48% of the popular vote. If a district or state is, say, R+1, that means it's basically even. So therefore, anything that is called even in the Cook Partisan Voting Index is actually really leaning Democrat. And anything that says R+2, Republican plus 2%, is actually leaning Republican. Now, taking a look at the future based upon the historical information, I think it's important also to have some common sense. Now, anecdotally, a lot of us talk about how during mid-cycle elections, the party not in the White House actually gains seats most of the time. Well, having said that, I took a look at that and I couldn't really find that trend. Therefore, I would hesitate to say anything about the difference between mid-cycle versus actual presidential election time period with regard to the impact on the Senate and the House, except for this. Common sense says if the president wins re-election and there's a huge turnout, those people will generally vote for the Republican candidates. I think common sense would indicate that to be true. In addition, common sense would seem to indicate that all the activity in our country this year with COVID-19, with the violence that has been going on, as well as a lot of the achievements that President Trump has accomplished, for example, Supreme Court nominees, all those things together indicate big turnout. Obviously, both parties believe in the open that it favors them. However, based upon enthusiasm numbers, as well as the anecdotal information with regard to rallies, it would indicate that President Trump and the Republican Party would have greater enthusiasm. Therefore, unlike the 2018 mid-cycle election where the House went back to the Democrats, this election will probably be more reflective of the reality in each of the districts and states. The U.S. Senate currently has 53 Republicans. One Senate election in Alabama this year is basically guaranteed to go to the Republicans. That makes it 54. There are 2 Republican-held seats, which are at risk right now. Some people would call them toss-ups. I think one has to be assumed that we're going to lose. So that brings us back to 53. The other one is a possibility to lose. That brings us back to 52. That's still the majority. Now, the press is reporting that there are 7 Republican seats that are toss-ups, as well as the 1 Democrat seat in Alabama, which is a possible gain by the Republicans. Well, the one in Alabama is almost guaranteed to go to the Republicans, and the 7 toss-ups are not really toss-ups. For example, the one in North Carolina. I've lived in North Carolina, lived in South Carolina, and I will tell you that Lindsey Graham and the Senator Tillis from North Carolina are not going to lose their elections. First of all, the states lean towards Republican, and second of all, it's just the media, as Rush Limbaugh would say, bloviating. Therefore, the Senate remains a majority Republican Senate with no less than 52 seats. A little side note for Senator Collins from Maine, Senator Gardner from Colorado. You know, both of their states are leaning Democrat. However, both of these senators are relatively moderate. They work across the aisle. They do some things that drives Republicans crazy. They do some things that drive Democrats crazy. But if this country really wants politicians that will do what's best for their states or district, as well as for the country, it really would be good if both Senator Collins and Senator Gardner were reelected. The House in 2020 is not as easy to determine as the Senate is. First of all, there's 435 seats all up for re-election. Second, you got to do some analysis. Just because a district is leaning left or right doesn't mean it's going to go left or right. You have to take a look at the personalities of the people involved. One of the things that did occur in 2018 when the House switched is that a lot of freshman Democrats came into the House. There's a lot less loyalty in the district there. True, it was a mid-cycle election with all kinds of negative press regarding President Trump. And President Trump really hadn't been in office long enough to actually start coming through with a lot of his promises, such as building the border wall. It took him a long time to get started on that because of the pushback he was getting. So analyzing the information provided by the Cook Partisan Voting Index and doing some research into the incumbents and their challengers, For example, in one district, there was a Republican incumbent who had been in office more than 2 years, who had been beat by a Democrat challenger in 2018. The incumbent doesn't appear to have anything that actually helps them stay in office. They won by just a few hundred votes, and the challenger is a former professional athlete with great name recognition. Therefore, leans Republican, no loyalty to the incumbent, and a pretty good challenger. Definitely going Republican. So let's talk about the numbers now. Regarding the House elections for 2020, first thing I'd like to say is I did not go into this with a preconceived notion about who was going to win. I went into it with the idea of just determining what made sense based upon the good information I could find. There are 435 seats in the House. First thing I did was figure out which of them are safe. What I mean by that is with gerrymandering, which I think has been actually bad for the country, there are certain districts which are sort of guaranteed to go to certain parties. In my calculation, there are 194 Republican seats which I consider safe. There are 199 Democrat-held seats which I consider safe. Plus, there is another district that's currently held by a Democrat congressperson. The numbers would indicate that it would go Republican. Doing the research into that specific district, I came to the conclusion that I cannot count on that one going Republican based on historical data and information. Therefore, that one will remain as a safe Democrat-held seat. So that gives the Democrats 200. Bottom line, 194 safe for the Republicans, 200 safe for the Democrats. That's where we're going to start. That means there's actually only 41 seats to discuss. There are 29 seats currently held by the Democratic Party, which I believe will go over to the Republicans. The districts individually lean Republican, and most of these people are freshmen. There are also 4 seats currently held by Republicans, which I believe for similar reasons will go to the Democrats. So the Republicans had 194 safe seats. They win another 29. That gives them 223, which is the majority. The Democrats had 200. They gain another 4. That gives them 204. There are 8 seats remaining for us to discuss. It's pretty simple. All 8 of them are toss-ups. Therefore, give 4 to each party, because it's just a toss-up. 223 plus 4 makes 227 for the Republicans, and that leaves 208 for the Democrats. Even if the Republicans lost all the toss-ups, they would still have the majority. So where are we with the Senate and the House? The Senate is majority Republican with a minimum of 52 seats, and the House is majority Republican with somewhere between 223 to 227 seats. Now a little update on the presidential election predictions. There are already a couple videos out there I made with regard to Professor Norpoth's and Professor Lichtman's models, the ones that have never been in conflict before with regard to who is going to win the presidential election. My first videos, and the reason for this channel, was because of the difference between Professor Norpoth's prediction and Professor Lichtman's prediction. Professor Norpoth predicted this year that President Trump would win re-election, and then he doubled up during the summer with a 91% probability and actually said he's going to gain more electoral college votes. While Professor Lichtman's 13 keys to the White House prediction says that President Trump was going to lose and former Vice President Biden was going to win. As you recall, I reviewed Professor Lichtman's book, 13 Keys to the White House, reviewed how he determined that from his perspective, former Vice President Biden was going to win election, and determined that without knowing who actually was going to win the election, Professor Lichtman had manipulated the data or not looked at the data properly to determine what his model should actually be predicting. For example, one on the economy dealt with the gross domestic product. Professor Lichtman, back when all the data was available that the country was resurging rapidly, stated that that key was going to go against President Trump. In my videos, I discussed how one of the tidbits of information came from the Atlanta Fed that put out a monthly update with regard to actual GDP and also their prediction for GDPs. Based on the information I saw, which was also available to Professor Lichtman, it looked like the gross domestic product for the third quarter was going to be at least 20%, if not higher, and I even said it could be as high as 30%. President Trump in his rallies for the last couple days has been discussing the fact that the Atlanta Fed seems to be indicating that the third quarter gross domestic product is going to be 30% or higher. That helps validate the research and review I did of Professor Lichtman's 13 Keys to the White House. For your continuing viewing pleasure, I've placed some additional links in my description below. One of them deals with, as I had said, the Sky News Australia interview of Ms. Barbara Heineback, but I'd also like to direct your attention to a New York Times related item, Ms. Barry Weiss, who was a Wall Street Journal reporter for many years. She was hired after the 2016 election so that they would have more conservative or moderate voices in their newspaper staff. She resigned this year and wrote a pretty detailed explanatory resignation letter outlining how the New York Times had initially been supportive of her views, but as the years went by, became more and more anti-Trump openly. In order for the United States to be much better in the future than today, we do need a strong Democratic Party. The Republicans can help the Democrats by winning so resoundingly this time. As I hope and predict, President Trump will win re-election, the Republicans will retain the majority in the Senate, and the Republicans will regain a majority in the House. I'm hoping the Democratic Party take a good look at itself and realize that the path it has been going down is not the path that will, first of all, give it power, and second of all, will result in anything good for the country. I would love it if the Republicans could help the Democratic Party become a better party. In order for the culture of the Democratic Party to change, top-level management would all have to change out, which I think would be good for our country and good for the Democratic Party. It's called a win-win. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your time. And as you know, I answer comments. And if you comment about wanting additional information, it will be provided. And thank you for watching the Honor and Knowledge channel.